Imagine discovering a battery inside an ancient tomb, not from 200 years ago, not from the Middle Ages, but from 2,000 years ago. Long before electricity, long before Edison, long before modern science. So the question is, who had power before we did? Welcome to the cradle of civilization, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers birthed empires that shaped the world. But in the dusty sands, near ancient Ctesiphon, once mighty capital of the Parthian and Sasanian empires, something was unearthed that would rewrite the rules of history, or at least challenge them. It was 19th. The world was on the brink of war, but in Iraq, archaeologists were digging into the past. A team led by local expert Sharif Yassif and Jawad al-Safa was excavating at a site called Kujit Rabu, just outside modern-day Baghdad. They weren't looking for batteries. They were hunting for clues to forgotten kings and lost treasures. What they found instead? A humble terracotta jar, about 5 inches tall, made of bright yellow clay. Unremarkable at first glance, but inside, that's where the mystery begins. The jar had been sealed with bitumen sticky, natural asphalt used by ancients for everything from waterproofing boats to mummifying the dead. Pop the seal, and you reveal a copper cylinder, rolled like a tube of foil, about 9 centimeters long. Inside that, an iron rod, oxidized and ancient, held in place like a forgotten sword in a stone. This wasn't just any pot. Similar jars had turned up before 4 in the 1930s at nearby Seleucia, 6 more at Ctesiphon itself. But this one, it caught the eye of Wilhelm Koenig, an Austrian archaeologist and the director of the National Museum of Iraq's lab. Koenig was no stranger to oddities. He'd spent years piecing together the puzzles of Mesopotamia. In 1938, he published a paper that would ignite a firestorm. This, he said, looks exactly like a battery. Copper outer shell, iron core, a stopper to hold in liquid. If you filled it with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or grape juice, it could generate a current. Koenig didn't just theorize. He saw parallels in modern Baghdad, where silversmiths were using clay pots to electroplate jewelry, a process eerily similar to what inventor John Wright would patent in 1839. But here's the kicker. This jar dated back to the Parthian era, around 250 BC to 224 AD, or maybe even later, to the Sasanian period, up to 640 AD. That's 1,800 to 2,200 years ago. Electricity in an age of chariots and clay tablets. Koenig's mind raced. He imagined ancient craftsmen dipping jewelry into these jars, watching gold dance onto silver through invisible forces, or healers using mild shocks to ease pain, like the electric rays. Romans wielded centuries later. The world dismissed it at first, buried in academic journals, forgotten amid the chaos of World War II. But in the 1970s, as space-age wonders filled our skies, eyes turned back to the ground. What if the ancients weren't as primitive as we thought? What if this really was a battery? And just like that, the Baghdad Battery was born not as a relic, but as a riddle. A glitch in the matrix of history. But this makes no sense. Or does it? Let's break it down. Okay, let's geek out for a second. If you're not an electrical engineer, don't worry, this isn't quantum physics. It's basic chemistry. The kind you might have played with in high school using lemons and pennies. But imagine that experiment, shrunk down and sealed in clay, 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the battery in 1800. First, the setup. The outer copper cylinder acts as the positive electrode or cathode, if you want to get technical. Copper's great at grabbing electrons. Inside, the iron rod is the negative electrode, or anode, eager to give them away. Between them, space for an electrolyte, a sour liquid to kickstart the reaction. Think vinegar, wine, or even fermented grape juice, all acidic enough to conduct. Pour it in, seal the top with bitumen, and boom, electrochemistry. The acid eats at the iron, releasing electrons that flow through the copper, creating a voltage difference. How much? Modern experiments say about half a volt to 2 volts per jar. Not enough to power your phone, but enough to light a tiny LED, or, say, deposit a thin layer of metal on something submerged nearby. Don't take my word for it. In the 1940s, American engineer Willard Gray built a replica right after Koenig's paper surfaced. He used copper sulfate as the electrolytes to get back then and hooked it to a basic circuit. It worked. For a short time, sure, but it produced electricity. Fast forward to 1978. German Egyptologist Arne Egebrecht got bolder. He crafted replicas, filled them with grape juice, something ancients could have made, and submerged a silver object. After hours, he claimed a 100 nanometer layer of gold had plated onto it. No photos, no detailed logs. But the idea stuck. Then came the pros. In 1993, researchers tested with diluted acetic acid and a dash of benzoquinone for stability. Good results, steady current, and who could forget Mythbusters in 2005? They lined up 10 jars in series. Juiced with lemon close enough to ancient citrusand hit 4.33 volts. Enough to etch zinc onto a coin overnight. Or, in a shocking demo, deliver a zap through acupuncture needles that made the crew yelp. It actually produced electricity. That's the shock moment. Not metaphorically this thing works, but why? In an era without wires or outlets, what good is a volt or two? Was it a parlor trick? A tool for the elite? Or something we can't even fathom? Hold that thought. Because the real fun starts when we ask, what were they using it for? Alright, we've got the how. Now the why. If this jar really hummed with power, what secrets did it unlock for the people of ancient Mesopotamia? Historians and tinkerers have cooked up 3 big theories over the decades. Each one's got legs scientifically, culturally, and each one's a rabbit hole of what-ifs. Let's dive in, starting with the most practical. Picture this. The bustling markets of 200 BC. Merchants hawk glittering jewelry necklaces, amulets, rings, fit for queens. But gold's rare, expensive. How do you make more without melting down the family heirlooms? Enter the Baghdad Battery. Koenig's original hunch was spot on here. Fill the jar with vinegar, dip in a silver object as the cathode, and use the iron rod as your anode may be hooked to a gold salt solution. The current flows, iones, migraeth, and boil a thin, even coat of gold bonds to the silver. No fire, no fuss, just chemistries. Quiet magic. Why does this make sense? Parthian and Sasanian artisans were masters of metalwork. We found intricately gilded statues and coins from the era, and Baghdad silversmiths in the 1930s were still using claypot methods that echoed this exact setup. Paul Kaiser, a physicist turned historian, crunched the numbers in the 1990s. With vinegar as electrolyte, you'd get just enough to 0.5 to 1 volt to plate gold at a snail's pace. Perfect for delicate work. Imagine workshops full of these jars, bubbling away under torchlight. A single jar for small pieces, chained together for bigger jobs. It could have revolutionized trade, letting common folk afford gold that shone like the sun gods themselves. Economically genius, scientifically sound. But no smoking gun, no ancient texts mention it. No residue of gold salts in the jars. Still, it's the theory that keeps skeptics up at night. What if they did master this, and we lost the recipe? Shift scenes. A dimly lit healer's tent. A patient writhes in pain, rheumatism, toothache, maybe a war wound. The healer, robes flowing, reaches for a jar. Not herbs or incantations, but a mild electric pulse. This one's got ancient precedents. The Romans, just a few centuries later, used live electric catfish torpedo-fish to numb pain during surgeries. Scribonus Largus, a first-century physician, wrote prescriptions for patients to stand on, raise until their limbs tingled. Electrotherapy. David Kaiser again. He proposed the Baghdad Battery as a portable version. Submerge needles in the electrolyte. Touch the patients. A feeble current, maybe 1 milliamp. Enough for acupuncture-like relief, without frying anyone. Electrolytes from fruits or wine would have been safe. The voltage stuff. Archaeological ties. Nearby digs uncovered medical tools. Bronze probes. Iron needles stat. Could have doubled as electrodes. And in Mesopotamian texts, like the Code of Hammurabi from 1750 BC, healers treated with shocks from the divine. Coincidence? Or lost knowledge, Dick? Electricity is medicine, bridging body and spirit. A patient feels the jolt, credits the gods or healer, and spreads the word. Boom. Instant reputation. But again, no direct evidence. No skeletons with electrode scars. Still, in a world of leeches and bloodletting, this would have been revolutionary. Now we get really fun. Enter the priests of Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian fire god, or the shadowy mages of Parthian cults. These jars weren't tools, they were talismans, vessels of the gods' wrath, or blessings. Think about it. Mesopotamia was obsessed with magic. Incantation bowls from the exact same Tesaphonar inscribed with spells to ward off demons, curse enemies, protect homes. We found hundreds. Clay pots sealed with bitumen, stuffed with scrolls of Aramaic prayers. Sound familiar? Emeritz Pasturi, a ritual expert, argues the Baghdad Battery fits right in. Fill it with holy water or acidic wine. Touch the iron rod to a supplicant's hand zap. A tingle, a spark. Feel the power of the divine. The priest booms. Instant miracle. Converts flock. Doubters convert or flee. Some jars from the digs held papyrus scraps maybe. Spells or iron nails for binding curses. Chain a few batteries. Amplify the shock. Use it in temple rites to exorcise spirits. Electric eels in the Euphrates could have inspired it. Ancients, new nature's shocks. This theory's got drama. Secret societies wielding forbidden tech to control the masses. Clickbait gold. And culturally, Zoroastrianism, revered fire and light electricity's cousin. But proof? Elusive as a ghost. No temple diagrams. No shocked skeletons. Yet it explains the lack of wires. These were one-off wonders, not factories. 3 theories, each wilder than the last. Electroplating for wealth. Medicine for healing. Rituals for ADO. Which one's true? Or all of them? The ancients might have been polymaths, blending science and sorcery. But not everyone's buying the hype. Hold up! Before we crown the ancients as electric wizards, let's pump the brakes! The Baghdad Battery isn't just a mystery, it's a battlefield. For every enthusiast replicating sparks in their garage, there's a dozen archaeologists rolling their eyes. Pseudoscience, they say. Cherry-picking. And honestly, they've got points. First off, context. These jars weren't alone. Excavations at Kujitrabu turned up everyday stuff: pottery shards, tools, bones. No workshop of wonders. No bundles of wires. No gold-plated rejects. The site's dating is fuzzy to Parthian, Sasanian. Pottery styles scream 3rd to 7th century AD. Post-Roman, when the world still didn't have batteries. Critics like Elizabeth Stone, a Mesopotamia expeci, put it bluntly in 2012. No archaeologist believes it's a battery. Why? Look closer. That bitumen seal. Its thermoplastic melts in heat, leaks in cold. Fine for storage, lousy for electrolytes that evaporate or corrode. Tests show oxygen trapped inside kills the reaction fast. You'd need constant refills. Impractical for rituals or plating sessions. Iron rod. Tapered at the top, like it was hammered in nut. Optimized for electrodes. If used, it erode unevenly, leaving weird where we don't see. And residues. One jar had acidic traces, maybe wine. But others, papyrus fibers, nails, glass bits, Emmerich Pastery's take. These were incantation vessels, sealed scrolls of spells, not vaults. Magic jars to trap demons, not generate power. Koenig's own evidence? Shaky. He thought local silversmiths electroplated with pots, turns out. They used mercury gilding, fire-based, no electricity. His gold-plated artifacts, fire-gilded too. Eggy bricks. Grape juice miracle. No docs, no peers to verify. Mythbusters zapped folks. Sure, but 10 jars in a row. Ancients had no rubber gloves or lemon groves on tap. Broader issue, absence of proof. Where are the mass-produced gadgets? The illuminated temples, electroplating leaves, traces copper ions, metal flakes. Nada. Medical shocks. Skeletons show no needle marks. Rituals? Cool story, but why no myths of thunder jars? Skeptics like those in Skeptical Inquirer from 1996 lump it with fakes. Dendera light bulbs. Koso artifacts. Bad archaeology calls it fringe fantasy. Even the BBC, hyping it in 2003, admitted corrosion suggests acid, but maybe just storage. So, what's the alternative? Boring, but plausible. A storage jar. For scrolls, oils, inks. The copper and iron, rusted scraps common in thrifty empires. Bitumen seals kept contents fresh. Fits the digs perfectly. Ritual bowls galore, but no tech boom. This controversy isn't dry, it's thrilling. It forces us to question, are we projecting modern genius onto the past? Or is the real scandal that we've underestimated them? Maybe it's both. The jar sits in a vault last Saint Prito. 1003 Iraq invasion poof vanished, mocking us. Battery or bowl? The debate rages, keeping historians up at night and us viewers glued to our screens. But zoom out. If not a battery, why does it look like one? Why do replicas work? Coincidence or clue? That leads us to the bigger puzzle. The Baghdad Battery doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has a thread in a tapestry of anomalies, whispers, that ancient minds danced with ideas we credit to the Enlightenment. Remember the Antikythera mechanism? That shipwrecked Greek computer from 100 BC. with gears predicting eclipses like a steampunk calculator. Built with Babylonian math, it shouldn't have survived the Bronze Age collapse. Yet there it is, rusting in a museum, taunting us. We knew more. Orgi, Bigli Tepe, Turkey's 12,000-year-old temple complex. Carved pillars, astronomical alignments erected by hunter-gatherers. Before wheels or riding, no farms, no cities, but T-shaped stones whispering of stars and rituals. How? Why bury it? These aren't isolated. Egypt's Dendera light bulbs. Etched reliefs, looking like filament lamps. South America's Baghdad-like batteries in clay pots. Patterns emerge. Electricity in Iraq, astronomy in Anatolia, mechanics in the Aegean. Lost tech, erased by time, war, or willful forgetting. Why does this matter? Because it flips the script on progress. We tell history as a straight line. Caves, 2 pyramids, 2 iPhones. But what if it's a web? Knowledge blooming, fading, rediscovered. Plato wrote of Atlantis' advanced society, sunk sat hubris. Hindu Vedas describe Vimanas flying machines, with mercury vortex engines. Myths, or memories. The Baghdad Battery fits, a simple hack, vinegar and metal, birthing wonders. Maybe Parthians traded secrets with Greeks, who learned from Babylonians, who echoed Sumerians. A Silk Road of sparks. If they had volts, what else? Wireless signals, basic circuits. Cities lit by jars, not flames. This builds a vibe. Ancient civs weren't. British were brilliant, experimenting in shadows, smarter than we think, until catastrophe struck. Plagues, invasions, dark ages, knowledge hoarded by priests, then lost. Edison didn't invent the bulb. Refined Italiano. Who knows what we reinvented? Your channel's all about the stick glitches. This shouldn't exist. Göbekli's pillars aligning with Sirius, Antikythera's. 30 gears for zodiac math. Now the battery. Proof we're not the pinnacle. We're rediscoverers. And that humbles us. Excites us. Maybe they were smarter than we think. What else did they know that we forgot? History isn't a straight line. Sometimes we discover things that don't belong in their time. A gear in the sea. Pillars from the Ice Age. A jar that sparks. And when we do, we're forced to ask, what else did the ancient world know that we forgot? The Baghdad Battery or relic reminds us. The past is deeper than we dig. Subscribe for more mysteries that bend time. Like if this shocked you. Comment your theory below. Plating, healing, magic, or just a pot. Next up, the Antikythera Deep Dive. Hit that bell, power up your feed. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. Arrah. Stay curious.